Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mental Breakdown podcast, where it is an easy listen, so it is easy to function. My name is Shay Lannon, and today we have a very special guest. He is named Dayron Rojas, and he is here to join us to speak on the topic of youth civic engagement. We are super happy to have him. I have the questions in the chat, and if any of you would like to ask your questions, I'm sure Dayron can provide us with either his email or his Instagram if you all have any further questions. But the questions that we have today really concern specifically the greatest threat to youth civic engagement, as well as voter suppression, whether the efforts are always overt, the split between the progressive youth movement, and a lot of other topics. So I'm going to add him to our live, and we'll get started. Let's see. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Surviving so far. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. So give us like an introduction of yourself. For like probably since yesterday or 2 days ago, I've been introducing you as like student leader, but just tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Well, first, thank you for having me, of course. What is it called? Yeah, so my name is Dayron Rojas, like Shayla mentioned. And what is it called? Well, I guess starting with my background, I have a lot of background in civic engagement, considering in nonprofit work. I worked in When We All Vote, My School Votes, program started by Miss Michelle Obama. Basically, a nonpartisan nonprofit spread around the country in order to help voter registration. That was our main focus. It really was at the beginning of, I would say, the summer before my senior year. So I would say 2020, that summer. We basically got around 10,000 voter registrations here in the state of Florida. I was one of the leads for this state, for Orange County specifically. One of three, if I remember correctly. It was a little while ago. And then now my current work leading up to a nonprofit that I actually co-founded last fall, so about a year now, with about 90 other civic students around the country. And it's a national nonpartisan nonprofit. And basically our main goal is, in order to enter high schools around the country and help students civically engage in their communities around what they care most about or what they personally believe is most important. you know um, and we also have kind of like a seasonal system of what we will be targeting specifically within our organization, but still allowing the freedom of students to organize. And then, yeah, I guess on my little personal background, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Germany, family's Peruvian. I came to the United States around the years of when I was around 7, around there. First was in New York, Queens, and then Virginia, Woodbridge specifically, and then here in Orlando, Florida. That's where I've primarily resided in. But I recently graduated from high school about a year ago, so I'm technically, I guess, a sophomore in college. I go to the University of Central Florida. Um, my major is political science with a focus in international relations. So we'll see how long we keep that on the pre-law track. So yeah, that's a little background.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And you mentioned When We All Vote. That is an amazing organization.
It really is, definitely.
Yeah, so I always like to ask our speakers, because our audience is mainly high school students, but we also have some middle school students tuning in, some college students. And probably like 2 days ago, we'd interviewed Tappan Vickery, pardon me, who is the Senior Director of Programming at Headcount, which is also a nonpartisan organization, but the word nonpartisan. So just tell us, like, break that word down for us.
Of course, yeah. So nonpartisan basically means that we're not affiliated with any political party. It means that we do not specifically work for any party. We do not promote any specific party within our, nonprofit, so our organization. It basically allows, anybody from however you identify within our political system to join us and, again, organize. make whatever you feel is most important, towards your community a reality. And we provide any resources we can, of course, help you, guide you, offer our opinion, suggestions, as long as, whatever project that whoever's creating aligns with our nonprofit and our values, you know, um, continues. And usually, when a nonprofit declares themselves nonpartisan, means that their values don't lean either left or right, which is usually in a political system. But yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Now, one thing that I would prefer we go about when it comes to questioning is, but at least when I was interviewing Miss Vickery, we started on a very not monotone, but a very sad note when we first started. So it was like, what's the greatest threat to youth civic engagement? And then, it's very I hate to say negative, but it's just true. The sad facts when it comes to youth civic engagement. So instead, we'll start on a high. So I ask you, let's see. Yeah, so where do you see young activists making the biggest impact in the next 2 years or in the next 10?
Okay, good question. I would say the biggest impact that I would see young activists in the next 2 years is, I think, voter registration, anything voting. Honestly, I think that there are multiple nonprofits, like the ones that I've participated in, that I know of many more that exist out there, that are specifically targeting, students within our age range specifically, and, graduating seniors, and trying to make future generations of lifelong voters. So I think the biggest impact that we'll see is around the age group, and trying to, get voter numbers up, specifically within youth. I feel like a lot of us, unfortunately, sometimes because of our experiences or background, or the communities we come from, have led us to believe that sometimes a vote isn't powerful, or that a vote doesn't matter. So I think there's many nonprofits out in the world right now, targeting that specific issue.
Sure. And something that I've seen recently with a few articles online is that type of headline that says, young people care about elections, but they just don't vote. So, what are your thoughts on those types of headlines?
I feel like okay, yeah. All right. I would say I think everybody cares about elections. I feel like sometimes we aren't educated enough in order to understand how our election system is built, or the history behind it. I would say specifically, unfortunately, at least within what I can speak of, and within Orange County Public Schools, or general public school systems in Florida, um, I don't think we are educated enough around, how voting works, or the in and outs and stuff like that. I don't think voting is sometimes the most accessible for people. So I would say that's the biggest issue. And it makes me sometimes sad a little bit to hear that. I've had conversations with people that sometimes don't believe, in our election system, don't believe in the vote. And sometimes when I ask them, I try to ask them to elaborate on why they feel that way. And, they usually think, oh, because, where does a vote go for? And it's like, I feel like it comes up from a place that sometimes they aren't educated enough on how it works. So they personally believe, you know, that their vote doesn't end up mattering. Um, but yeah.
Um, I'm glad you mentioned that, at least the education part of it, because really that's the core of the conversation today. So yesterday, I know I keep mentioning articles, but that's really all that informs the questions and the topics. But Georgia recently, I believe, added a course to their curriculum that's, in essence, civics, the basics of civics and civic engagement, and democracy, and the importance of voting, but in high school, so in secondary education. And that had me think, in middle school, flashback to when that was, when I was taking a civics class, is wasn't really paying attention, knew the content, was taking the quizzes, and so on and so forth. So what are your thoughts on basically Florida taking after Georgia? And like you said, if we were to have more youth being educated on the importance of voting, but in high school as opposed to middle school?
I would say I think there needs to be a level of maturity when it comes around that topic. I know, like, most of us, at least from my experience from middle school, I feel it comes, like, hey, we just want to have fun, like, pass our classes, make sure we're not, scolded by our parents and stuff like that. But I feel like once you get into high school, it becomes like, I feel like you attain a little bit more of that maturity in order to speak on those topics or even discuss those topics. I know, like, in middle school, I think every person was, required to take a civics intro course type of thing. I don't remember that much about it, if I'm being honest. I feel like I remember mostly from high school. So I would hope that, there's the opportunity in order to take that type of course if, that was implemented within Florida. Um, would be great. I think, students would benefit from that and, being able to ask their questions, no matter if they think, hey, it's a dumb question or, if they don't know, like this should be the place, our education system, this place where, we should be nurturing our students into becoming, I would say, you know, citizens of our country, and letting them learn, around the process of voting and stuff like that. I think that would be a great opportunity.
Agreed. Now, once we are informed, like once the teens do know, like the teens, our friends, ourselves understand the importance of voting and walking up to that ballot box. From then on, what do you think needs to happen to really bring the youth to power, and then have it like be have that type of behavior continue, like in past 2022? Because I know we have some amazing candidates. I was just telling Tappan is like this year I believe I have been the most active when it comes to like researching the candidates, what they stand for, following their Instagram, subscribing to their emails, just to see really what's going on. And the two that really stick out is Maxwell Frost, and then you have what's her name? Um, Liz Miranda, who's running for Massachusetts Senate, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
But they're both young people of color, and so it's amazing to see. But just to make sure, like, what can happen in order for youth to continue to stay engaged past this 2022 election?
I would say communication, transparency. I feel like within our political system, I feel like a lot of us sometimes feel as though, things aren't transparent. Things are happening behind the background and stuff like that, that we don't get to see. And sometimes that is true to a certain extent. But I would say in order to continue being engaged, past, the general elections, because I feel like the way our political system has been very promoted, president is usually the one where like everybody's like, that's the most important election and stuff like that. But that's not completely true. But that's another question, another topic. I would say, keeping and following up, like, all right, you casted your ballot, at this point, follow up, like, hey, what's going on with those ballots, the counting, the numbers behind it, who ends up winning, even if it's not the candidate you personally, voted for, still making sure that candidate is being held accountable. If that is that person that you did vote for and they did win the election, great, but still holding them accountable, following up, with what they put in legislation, within Congress and stuff like that, with the House of Representatives or the Senate or whatever, and following up and making sure that they're keeping up with what they, said that they would do during their campaign.
Yeah.
And definitely.
Now this like last question. This is a teen podcast, right? And so with that, I know you're what, sophomore in college.
Yeah.
That you're heading your own nonprofit or co-heading, co-piloting, I would say. Um, so just tell us, like, what are you up to now? Where can we follow your nonprofit? What do you do in your free time? How self-care, like as an activist, just like tell us about what Dayron does outside of activism.
Okay. Well, that's my favorite topic about myself.
Yes.
But honestly, I would say right now, most of my work, at least within civic world, is again in the nonprofit. It's called Rhizome. We have a website, Instagram. Our Instagram is at we.rise, RHIZE. on Instagram. And then you can follow our links and stuff like that in our bio. But I would say I guess within that nonprofit, I am a co-founder. I'm a Southeast regional organizer. So basically, me and two other people, we organize, everything in the state of Florida. I have two community organizers that specifically focus on Broward and Duval. But that I'm also on the board of directors for my nonprofit, and I'm also a social media lead. So a lot of the posts that you might see on our Instagram, I might create and stuff like that with a couple other people. But that I would say most of what you can probably follow me on is, again, it's probably my Instagram, but I'm not that much on social media. Nowadays, I've taken a lot more back on that. But I would say that's mostly on the nonprofit world. Most of my stuff is just school, y'all. All right. I am right now getting into Latin Rhythm, which is a club on school, which like we dance and stuff like that once a week, and Latin American Student Association. But yeah, I would say I am loving the spinoff from Game of Thrones, House of Dragons. Not
Mhm.
sure if you've seen that, but definitely recommend it. But yeah. And I would say, to your specific part of the question, as an organizer, how to take a break, mental health break from all this. I would say politics is draining, y'all, especially as a person of color, especially, with my intersectional identities as, a gay man and stuff like that. Um, it's hard, to sometimes hear like people don't want you to have certain, abilities within our government system. And sometimes you just got to take a break. Like, I'm going to shut my phone off. I'm going to go ahead and watch a show, or I'm going to go take a walk outside. And that's some of the personal stuff that I do. I love walking around UCF campus. I recommend it if you're ever on UCF to explore it. Um, but just making sure that you're thinking about yourself and that you're not 100% focused on whatever is going on in the news, whether you're watching the TV news or reading an article. Just take a mental health break, check when you need to, and don't be afraid to, because everybody does. And everybody comes to a point in their life where it's like, it's way too much. But yeah.
Okay. All right. I love that. And I've been to UCF. Y'all have like a whole outlet on campus.
We do. It's a really big campus.
Gosh, with like the stores and I was like, oh,
Yes.
okay. And I would say last thing before we close out, if you could give us a little drop for the podcast, so just introducing yourself and then saying you're listening to the Mental Breakdown podcast, that would be awesome. So you can edit that into a little trailer on Instagram, and then that's it. So are you good with that?
Yeah, of course. No problem.
And action.
All right. Hi, my name is Deiron Rojas, and you're listening to the Mental Break podcast.
Yes, thank you so much. And that would be all. I thank you, Deron, for joining us this afternoon. I know it's a Saturday. Thank you, everyone.
You're good.
Who's tuning in this weekend. Make sure to stay tuned for the trailer that will be posted on Instagram later this week. And yes, have a beautiful day.
You too. Thank you again.